Hi everyone, tonight we're going to time travel straight into the worst kind of hunger. Not your forgot to eat lunch kind. Not even your broke college student kind. No, we're talking medieval hunger. The kind where your stomach clenches around nothing but a vague hope and half a crust of yesterday's bread. You probably won't survive this. Imagine waking up on a cold dirt floor. It's still dark out. You roll over trying to rub the stiffness from your limbs, and the first thing you notice besides the chill and the smell of damp straw is the hollow echo in your belly. You're starving, again, but that's normal. You haven't had a real meal in, what, days? Maybe you got lucky last week when your neighbor's pig dropped dead and no one asked questions. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Also drop your location and local time. I love seeing how far this weird little history family stretches. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. You shuffle to your feet. No shoes, no blanket. You're wearing the same wool tunic you slept in, and it itches in places you can't reach. Your breath fogs in the air. Outside, the rooster hasn't even started yelling yet. You're already behind. The kitchen, if you can call the corner with the soot-covered pot that holds nothing new. You rummage for something edible. There's a piece of bread. It's hard. Really hard. You knock it against the wall and a bit of plaster falls off. Still, you gnaw on the edge. You have no choice. And this is breakfast. The thing is, people imagine medieval times like some kind of rustic food fantasy. Goblets of wine, roast beasts on wooden platters, peasants singing with turkey legs in hand. Yeah, no. Unless you were royalty, your meals were mostly beige, mostly bitter, and mostly not enough. Hunger was a permanent background noise. Historians still debate whether peasants regularly ate 2 or 3 meals a day, but let's be real. You're not eating anything that counts. Breakfast might be ale, some dry bread, maybe a chunk of cheese if the rats didn't get it first. You don't even own a fork. You've got a wooden spoon. One. It's a prized possession. You sleep with it. You miss coffee. You don't know what it is, of course, but your soul cries for it. A warm cup of bitterness to wake up with. That's future magic. In this world, you might drink small beer, a weak fermented drink with barely any alcohol. Children drink it too. It's safer than the well water, and sometimes it helps keep the hunger at bay. Not by feeding you, just by giving your stomach something to complain about. As the morning drags on, you think about work. You've got to gather firewood, maybe dig out turnips if it's winter. If it's summer, you might be thatching roofs or tending the Lord's field. All on an empty stomach. Your joints ache. Your vision swims a little. That's normal. Hunger headaches are just part of life. You once fainted in the middle of a harvest. Everyone just stepped around you. Let's talk about gruel. It's the food that loves you back because it keeps coming, day after day. Oats or barley boiled in water, maybe with a little milk if the cow hasn't gone dry. If you're feeling fancy, you might toss in some herbs, not for flavor, just to pretend. Last winter, someone tried to make lentil stew. You remember that. It wasn't bad until you realized the lentils were actually pebbles. Some idiot kid stored them in the wrong sack. Broke 2 teeth and no one laughed. Not even a little. Hunger sharpens your senses, but it dulls your soul. You stop dreaming about abundance. You start hoping for crumbs. The baker down the road uses sawdust in his bread. Everyone knows. No one cares. It makes it heavier, more filling. The bread tastes like wood and regret, but it fills the corners of your stomach. One day your friend traded his belt for a handful of beans. He boiled them, ate them slowly. We watched like it was a miracle. Food is status. Food is power. When the Baron rides through town, you smell roasted meat from his caravan, and you swear your mouth waters for hours. You'd steal a bone from his dog if you thought you could get away with it. Your grandmother tells you stories how things were better in her day. They always are, aren't they? But even she remembers the winter of the rats. When the grain stores were raided by rodents and people started setting traps not to protect the food, but to catch dinner. One guy roasted a crow and passed it off as goose. No one noticed. Or maybe no one cared. It was warm, it was meat, and it didn't crawl off the plate. You don't think about nutrition. You don't think about vitamins. You think about fullness. And even that is rare. Today's going to be like every other day, a slow, gnawing ache in your belly, some stiff bread and dreams of butter. Butter. That's the real prize. Rich people eat butter. You scraped the bottom of a jar for it once, and it felt like your birthday and Christmas had collided. Too bad you don't know what either of those are. Anyway, time to get to work. Maybe you'll find something edible out in the woods. Maybe someone left a crust behind. Or maybe it's just another day of chewing the same old sadness. You cradle the hunk of bread in your palm like it's treasure. It's yesterday's loaf, or maybe the day before's. It's hard to tell when it all tastes the same. You bite in and immediately regret it. It's like chewing a rock dipped in sour. The crust flakes into dust. The inside is a dense grayish lump, and you're almost sure there's something moving in there. You pinch out a crumb and spot it a wriggling weevil. That's the third one this week. You flick it away with the kind of resignation that only comes from too many disappointments and not enough calories. Welcome to the world of medieval bread. You'd think bread would be the one reliable thing, right? The one anchor in your dirt-smeared life. Nope. Bread in the Middle Ages was as much a gamble as drinking water or trusting your neighbor's beef stew. It was cheap, yes. Filling, sort of. But it was rarely fresh, rarely soft, and rarely safe. Historians still debate whether the average peasant got enough daily calories from bread alone. The math looks okay, but the reality, you've got mold, bugs, sometimes even chalk or powdered bone mixed in depending on who baked it and how desperate they were to stretch the flour. Flour, by the way, is barely sifted. Stones from the mill sneak in, your teeth. They don't stand a chance. Here's the weird part. Bread was class-coded. If you were rich, your bread was white. Not because they had better ingredients, but because they had better sieves. The bran was removed. The result? A soft, white, airy loaf. For peasants like you, it's rye barley, or worse, maslin, a mix of whatever grains hadn't spoiled in the shed. It's heavy sour, and it goes stale before it cools. And don't even think about butter. That's for holidays or bribes. Most days you eat it dry, or if you're lucky, with a smear of lard. Sometimes the lard is already turning. You eat it anyway. Hunger doesn't argue. You pass the baker's hut and glance at his loaves cooling on the windowsill. They look good from a distance, but you know better. Last spring he got caught padding his dough with ground beans and dirt. Just enough to bulk it out. Got fined a pig for it. He shrugged, said it wouldn't kill anyone. The pigs disagreed. One of your friends got a job hauling sacks at the mill. came back with a black eye and a story. Turns out the miller was secretly selling the best grain to the abbey and giving everyone else the sweepings from the floor. That's the stuff that sticks to your tongue like clay and tastes faintly of rat urine. You laugh because what else can you do? There are guilds, sure, supposed to regulate the bread trade. Make sure loaves are a standard weight price and quality. But guess what? That only helps people who can afford to complain. You're just glad the loaf isn't still warm from the sun instead of the oven. Back in the day, they used trenchers, stale, flat hunks of bread that doubled as plates. You'd dump your stew or meat if you had any onto it and eat everything. Or if you were lucky enough to have a master, he'd toss the greasy trencher to the dogs. Or worse to you, at least the stew soaked in. Odd fact, some bread was so hard it was used as building material. Not kidding. There are records of it being packed into walls as insulation. Makes sense. If it's not good for eating, maybe it'll keep out the wind. You once heard a traveler from Italy boast about focaccia, soft, olive oil-kissed flatbread. You tried to imagine what that might taste like. Your mouth watered so badly it hurt. Instead, your reality is something between a doorstop and a punishment. One day, your younger cousin asked why bread doesn't smile like apples. You didn't know what to say. Apples are rare, and bread doesn't smile. You take another bite. It's better than nothing, which is the highest compliment a peasant meal can get. Even the process of getting bread is humiliating. You wait in line, coins sweaty in your palm, hoping the baker hasn't sold out. If he has, you can try begging for crumbs, or maybe he'll let you scrape the burnt bits from the oven floor. And that's another thing. Burnt bread happens all the time when the ovens are misjudged. No timers, no thermometers, just a handful of embers and some guesswork. You don't even scrape it off anymore. You just eat around the black parts. The smell of fresh bread, when it's done right, is a kind of medieval miracle. It draws people like moths to flame. People sniff the air, follow it like they're in a trance. Sometimes the baker waves them away. Sometimes he lets them sniff the loaves as long as they don't touch. For a second, it almost feels like luxury. But let's not get romantic. Bread in your world is survival food. It fills the gaps. It doesn't nourish. It doesn't delight. It just delays the next wave of emptiness. There's one weird thing, though. On feast days, the local lord might toss out bread to the poor. Actual white bread. Soft, warm, and flaky. You once caught a piece and wept while eating it. It was like biting into a dream. Then someone punched you and took the rest. Yeah, bread sucks. And it'll suck again tomorrow. But you'll keep eating it. Keep gnawing at the edges of hope. Because in this time, hope comes shaped like a loaf, and it never ever rises the way you want. The meat smells suspicious. Not bad exactly, just wrong. Like it's trying to cover something up. You lift the slab to your nose, inhale cautiously, and immediately regret it. There's a sweet, sour, metallic tang like wet leather rolled in onions and left under the bed. You look at the butcher. He shrugs. It's fresh, he says, not meeting your eyes. Welcome to the medieval version of a refrigerator nothing. No ice boxes, no coolers, no warning labels. If it didn't walk in today, it's already halfway to the afterlife. You might be wondering how they kept meat from rotting. The answer, they didn't. Not really. They just tried to slow it down. Salt it, dry it, smoke it, soak it in vinegar, drown it in spices if they had them, then cross their fingers, and sometimes their legs if food poisoning hit hard. Historians still debate whether medieval preservation methods were truly effective or just elaborate ways to commit slow suicide. The truth. Somewhere in the middle. If you did it right and had the money salted, meat could last for weeks. Smoked meat a little longer. But taste, texture, nutritional value. That's the part no one brags about. Salt was the MVP of medieval survival. It wasn't just for flavor, it was practically magic. It drew out moisture, kept flies away, and gave your tongue something to complain about besides mold. Problem is, salt wasn't cheap. So if you were poor, you got the cuts that barely deserved saving tongue organs or bones, and hoped they didn't start talking back. There's also pickling. Ever had pickled fish? Now imagine it's been brined in a barrel with questionable herbs left in the sun for a week, then forgotten until someone remembered there's no dinner. That's your main course. Congratulations. Your aunt once stored meat in fat, a kind of ancient Tupperware trick. She cooked the meat, then submerged it in cooled lard so no air could get in. It worked, sort of, until one year the top layer grew a fur coat. She scraped it off and served it anyway. No one died. That's a win. You've also heard of garum. It's this fermented fish sauce from the Roman days. Still hangs around in some places. Smells like failure. Tastes worse. But apparently it keeps forever, which is the only reason it still exists. Oh, and let's not forget pemmican. Not exactly medieval European, but people in colder regions like the Norse used it. Dried meat pounded with fat, and berries shaped into little bricks of despair. Energy dense, yes. Emotionally uplifting, no. And now for the weird fact, some people tried burying meat. Literally digging a hole, shoving it underground, and hoping the cold earth would keep it safe. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it came back. Different. One guy dug his up, found it crawling with maggots, and just shrugged. More protein, he said. That guy had strong teeth and a short life. Here's something fun. There was a kind of meat jelly called aspic. It's made from boiled bones and tendons cooled into a wobbly mass. Think meat jello. If you've never had to slurp your supper off a spoon while it jiggles at you, consider yourself blessed. And in cities, things got even worse. The smells of spoiled meat mixed with dung and smoke. Butchers dumped offal in the street. Dogs dragged bones through alleyways. Rats had feasts every night. Your stomach learned to ignore the stench. Your brain didn't. Sometimes people added herbs, not for taste, but for safety. Sage, thyme, garlic. These weren't flavorings. They were desperate little spells whispered into the pot in hopes it would kill fewer people than last week. Oddly enough, rich folks were in trouble too. Because they had more meat, they had more to preserve and more chances to get it wrong. So they drowned their meats in imported spices, cinnamon, pepper, cloves. Not for luxury, for camouflage. A leg of mutton that's been sweating in a pantry for 3 days, add enough saffron, and it almost smells like dessert. This brings us to your best friend, the stew pot. Hanging above the fire all day, all night. You drop in scraps of salted meat, dried beans, old cabbage garlic if you're lucky. The pot never fully empties. You just keep adding to it. Some people say a stew in France lasted decades. They kept it going so long it had a personality. Probably a bad one. You once found a piece of fresh pork that was blue. Not moldy exactly, just wrong. You boiled it for hours, added extra garlic, and fed it to the dog first. The dog lived, so you ate the rest. Remember that time your cousin caught a pigeon, roasted it whole, didn't gut it, didn't pluck it right. You spent 3 days vomiting behind the shed. Your family called it cleansing. You called it a near-death experience. The butcher, meanwhile, sells mystery meat. You've seen rabbits with cat-shaped heads, squirrels with no tails, even the occasional chunk of something you just know wasn't on 4 legs. You don't ask. You can't afford to. Food safety. Not a concept yet. You live on instincts. Sniff it, squish it, taste a tiny bit, and wait. If nothing itches, tingles, or burns in an hour, it's dinner. Still, somehow you survive. One questionable chop at a time. Your body adapts. Your stomach becomes a pit of iron, and your tongue forgets what tenderness tastes like. But once, just once, you had roast goose. Real goose. From a wedding feast. Crisped skin, juicy flesh. You still dream about it. That one bite, that one night. Then you woke up cold and hungry, chewing a bone you'd already chewed twice before. You step outside into the misty dawn with a dull ache in your gut and a splinter of old bread in your teeth. The earth is wet. Your boots, if you own any, are thin enough to feel every pebble. But you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about something green, something crisp, something that tastes like life. Too bad that something doesn't exist in your village. Vegetables in the modern sense barely feature in your diet. Sure, you've got a garden patch or your neighbor does, and you've seen greens now and then. But most of them are wild bitter and best boiled until unrecognizable. If it's got a leaf, you throw it in the pot. Doesn't matter if it's turnip tops or weeds. As long as it's not poisonous or hasn't made someone visibly sick, it counts as dinner. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants ate more plants than meat. The records suggest yes, but those records weren't written by hungry villagers. And what they don't tell you is that most of those plants tasted like punishment. This wasn't kale massaged with olive oil and Himalayan salt. This was dock nettle dandelion. Whatever could be foraged, boiled, and swallowed before the frost came. You once mistook foxglove leaves for lettuce. The shaman nearly slapped you into next week. That one stops hearts, she growled. Yours first, and then there's cabbage. Cabbage is the hero no one wanted. It grows almost anywhere. It lasts. It survives. You hate it. Not because it's bad, but because it's always there. Boiled, mashed, stewed, or worse, fermented into a sour mess that makes your breath offensive even to goats. But it fills you up, and in a life like this, that's love. Carrots, if they're not stolen. Onions, if they haven't sprouted. Beans, if you don't mind the side effects. You once cleared a barn with a single fart. No one spoke to you for 3 days. You didn't mind. More soup for you. Peas are a treat, green, sweet, and seasonal. You get them once a year if you're lucky. And if the Lord Steward doesn't take the lot for the manor house. Trickle-down food theory wasn't a thing. It was more like trickle never. Your neighbor grows leeks. He calls them poor man's garlic. You'd trade your soul for a real clove of garlic. But it's imported expensive and precious, so you use wild garlic when you can find it. Strong, spicy, and oddly comforting. Once you overdid it and couldn't feel your tongue for an hour. Worth it. Now, here's a little oddity. People believed vegetables were dangerous if eaten raw. Uncooked greens were thought to rot in the stomach, breed worms, or worse, make you melancholy. You don't need help feeling melancholy. You need fiber. But you still boil everything until it's limp and gray, because that's what your grandmother did. And your grandmother didn't die from cabbage. She died from falling into a frozen latrine. But no one brings that up. You once tried to eat a raw apple. It was tart, fibrous, and covered in something that might have been wax or just dirt. Your teeth ached. You didn't finish it. Most fruits aren't available anyway. Apples, pears, and berries exist, but they're seasonal and hard to store. You've seen dried fruit at the market. It costs more than your entire week's pay. So you settle for stewed plums in spring or apple peels if the baker's in a generous mood. And don't even think about salad. That's not a word you know. If someone offered you raw leaves on a plate, you'd assume it was a joke. Or poison. Possibly both. You forage more than you farm. The forest gives you sorrel mushrooms, carefully chosen nuts, and wild onions. It also gives you splinters, bee stings, and the occasional squirrel bite. But the risk is worth it. When you score a bundle of nettles, you feel rich. You boil them with oats, add some stale cheese, and pretend you're at a noble feast. Speaking of nobles, they don't eat vegetables either. Not really. Too low. Too common. They chase meats, pies, exotic spices. You once saw a noblewoman throw away an entire plate of peas because they looked too green. You stared at those peas for a long time. You still think about them sometimes. There's this myth about medieval people eating only meat. It's not true, but it feels true when your plate's just a puddle of beige. A few weeks ago, your cousin found a recipe for beetroot stew in a stolen monk's manuscript. Tried it. Tasted like earth and regret. The church, as always, had opinions. Too many vegetables, prideful gluttony. Not enough sloth. Grow too much and sell it, greed. You once gave a priest a pumpkin and got a lecture on vanity. He still took the pumpkin, though. Fun fact, people used to believe that cucumbers caused madness. Not surprising. After chewing through one of those spiky, bitter things, you kind of understand why. You gave one to a neighbor once and didn't see him for days. Coincidence, probably. Still unsettling. By midsummer, you're sick of soup. By midwinter, you'd kill for it. You dream of a world with spices, with flavor, with texture. You dream of color, something besides brown. Every meal is brown, or gray. Sometimes greenish-brown if you're lucky. You miss the idea of crunch. Sometimes in your dreams, you eat something cold, fresh, washed, maybe even a tomato. But those are still centuries away, locked in the future, with microwaves, French fries, and iced tea. Instead, you go back to the garden. You dig, you pull, you pray, and you thank whatever gods are listening that the soil still gives. Because in the end, bitter greens are better than nothing. And nothing is always closer than you think. You're thirsty. Not grab a bottle of water thirsty. Not even sweaty workout thirsty. You're medieval thirsty, which means your options are limited. You glance at the bucket near the hearth. The water in it's cloudy, a bit green. Something small is floating in it. You pretend it's a leaf. You don't believe it, but pretending helps. So what do you drink? Not water, at least not if you value your internal organs. The well might be contaminated. The stream downstream from the butcher's dump site. The rain barrel crawling with slime by midsummer. You once drank from a roadside puddle and saw your life flash before your eyes. Spoiler, it was mostly bread cabbage and mild suffering. So you drink beer. Historians still debate whether even children regularly drank ale in place of water. But if you're living it, yeah, you do. Because small beer is weak, barely alcoholic, and surprisingly safe, if only because the brewing process boils out the parasites. It doesn't taste great. It's flat, warm, and a little sour, but it won't kill you. And in this world, that's enough. Sometimes it's not even beer. It's ale, which back then means a cloudy, half-fermented liquid with all the charm of pond water. You get used to it, like you got used to the smell of sheep dung and your uncle's political opinions. There's also wine, but that's for the rich. Unless you live in a vineyard region, and even then you're drinking the dregs. Sour, thin, and often stretched with water that makes it worse, not better. You once tasted posset. It's milk curdled with ale, sometimes spiced. Imagine warm yogurt and flat beer got into a fight, and someone added nutmeg out of spite. You drank it anyway. It was a festival. You were supposed to be happy. Your village makes a kind of mead too, honey wine. But honey's expensive and bees are moody, so it's rare. Reserved for weddings, wakes, or the time that guy fell in the mill pond and came out a prophet. You're still not sure if he's okay. You've heard rumors of spring water. Crystal clear, flowing through hills in the north. Tastes like snow and starlight. You've never seen it. You assume it's a myth, like hot baths or fair tax policies. Even milk is a gamble. It has to be fresh, like just squeezed from the goat fresh. Otherwise it turns, and when it turns, it turns. The smell sticks in your nose for days, and yet you've drunk worse. You've eaten worse. Weird fact, sometimes people made milk soup. Warm milk bread, maybe an onion. It sounds almost comforting until you realize it curdles by the second spoonful. But you were 9, it was winter, and it was the only thing in the pot. You slurped it with pride. And gas. Then there's water from barrels. Rainwater. Cisterns. You once watched a frog swim in the village barrel for 2 weeks. Someone said it kept the water fresh. Someone else said frogs were lucky. You didn't drink for 3 days. Your cousin tried filtering water through a linen cloth once. It helped, sort of. You still got sick, just slightly slower. You both laughed about it while curled around your stomachs on the floor. You've heard that rich people in the cities drink flavored water, rose water, orange water, herbs, steeped like tea. Sounds dreamy. They call it medicinal. You call it fantasy. In desperation, some villagers make gruit, a bitter herbal brew used before hops became common. It's brewed with yarrow bog myrtle and whatever else they find growing behind the outhouse. It tastes like someone boiled socks and added regret. But it's wet. That's the main requirement. Now here's where it gets grim. Dehydration isn't just a summer problem. In winter, your well might freeze. Your rain barrels crack. Snow. You can melt it, but it takes time and wood and effort. You've eaten snow before. Burned your lips on the pot trying to speed it up. Worth it, yes. Always yes. One day the priest told everyone the river was blessed. 2 kids drank from it and developed a cough that sounded like dying birds. The priest moved the blessing to a different stream. The kids got better. Maybe. Once during a bad drought, your neighbor boiled nettles into a tea. It worked. Sort of. Everyone hallucinated for a bit, and one guy married a tree. They're still together, kind of. People get creative. They brew herbs, ferment roots, boil bark. They mix honey vinegar and water into something called oxymel. It's supposed to balance your humors. Mostly it balances your stomach upside down. And if all else fails, you just drink less. You learn to live on sips. You chew your food slowly. You suck on rocks. It's not hydration, it's hope. And in the medieval world, hope is always just one gulp away from a stomachache. You dream of ice, of fountains, of that sound water makes when it's clean and running and no one's peed in it. One day you think one day you'll taste that kind of water. Until then, bottoms up, and don't look too closely. You smell the stew before you see it, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It hits your nose like a wet sock left in the sun, with a hint of boiled onion and something vaguely animal. You shuffle closer. The pot bubbles like a swamp in spring. Bubbles rise, pop, and release a wheeze of steam that smells like old secrets. This apparently is dinner, and also lunch, and probably breakfast too. Welcome to perpetual stew, a pot that never empties, never truly cools, and may be older than you. It sits over the fire day and night, like a sacred cauldron of community misery. Add something when you can. Take some when you're hungry. Don't ask what's at the bottom. Historians still debate whether the eternal stew was common practice or just one of those culinary urban legends that refuses to die. But you're living it. And in your house, the stew has a personality, a bad one. It started as rabbit once, maybe. That was weeks ago. Since then, it's had cabbage barley, a bone that might have been lamb, some kind of dried fish, 3 cloves of garlic, and for one glorious afternoon, a turnip that didn't smell like feet. The stew absorbed them all. Now it's brown. Just brown. No other adjective fits. Just brown. The flavor changes daily. Sometimes earthy, sometimes sour. Once it tasted suspiciously like cinnamon, and no one could figure out why. You don't remember adding cinnamon. You don't remember owning cinnamon. You stir it with a stick that's never been washed. Why would you wash it? The stew is always hot. Heat kills everything, right? Odd fact, in some towns, stew pots were considered heirlooms, passed down generations. Grandmother's stew pot with the same glaze and the same crack down the side, still bubbling, still feeding, not well, but consistently. People tell stories about what goes into the stew. A wedding chicken that fell in. A spoon someone forgot. Once a rat. No one talks about that last one. They just pretend it was a potato. Potatoes aren't even in Europe yet, but denial is seasoning too. You remember when a traveling peddler gave your mother a dried herb bundle, told her it would lift the soul and settle the gut. She tossed it into the stew. The stew turned purple for 2 days. Everyone agreed it was the best week ever. Sometimes you just stare into the pot. Watch the bubbles rise. You swear you see images in the steam. A happy future. A full stomach. A pie. You blink and it's gone. There's a rule: never scrape the bottom. That's where the ancestors live. Also the burnt layer that might kill you. Once your uncle scraped it by accident. The smell made the cat vomit. The cat eats frogs. You once tried to make your own stew. You didn't have much. Some beans, a shriveled onion, half a carrot. You were so proud. Stirred it slow, whispered to it, treated it like something special. You forgot the salt. The whole village pretended to like it. You cried into your bowl. Feast days are the only time the stew gets a real upgrade. Someone slaughters a pig, or a goat, or something that used to have horns and an attitude. The meat goes in with fanfare. For about 2 hours, the pot smells like hope. Then the magic fades and it goes back to its usual aroma survival. You're not even sure what stew should taste like anymore. It's like background noise. Your body recognizes it. Your tongue doesn't care. It's warm. It fills space. It keeps you upright. Some say stew keeps the village together. Everyone contributes. Everyone eats. No one owns it, but no one questions it either. It's democracy boiled to mush. You once had a dream you dropped something sweet into the pot. A plum, maybe a fig. The stew turned golden, shimmering. Angels sang. You woke up chewing your blanket. The funny part, you grow fond of it. You curse it, sure. But it's always there. When the world's unfair. When the winter's cruel. When the sky opens and the Lord raises taxes again. The stew bubbles. It's constant. It doesn't judge, it doesn't care. Sometimes in the middle of the night you sneak a bowl. Sit by the dying fire. Sip slowly. Pretend it's soup from a tavern in a faraway land. Pretend you're a traveler, a scholar, a person with teeth, and when the bowl is empty and the warmth settles in your chest, you scrape the last bit from the rim. Not the bottom. Never the bottom. Just the rim. Just enough to remind you it's not good food. But it's food. That's something. You hear it before you see it, the low, slow squelch of something being sliced. Then the clop of heavy boots on sticky wood. The butcher's stall is open, and the smell hits you like a wagon load of hot manure. Rotting meat, sour blood, and something metallic that makes your stomach churn even before breakfast. This is where meat comes from, and you're here to maybe buy some, or maybe just to stare and pretend. Either way, you pull your cloak tighter, hold your breath, and step closer. You're not the only one. A line of villagers snakes down the lane, most of them clutching coins, baskets, or dreams. Meat is rare, expensive, a prize, and also a gamble. It might feed you, or it might kill you. The butcher looks up. His apron is brown-red. Could be dried blood. Could be yesterday's dinner. His cleaver gleams. Not from polish, just from frequent contact with bone. What'll it be? He grunts, gesturing to a spread that could be pork, beef, something else. Historians still debate whether medieval butchers followed consistent food safety practices, or whether most of them just eyeballed everything and hoped for the best. Based on what you're seeing, it's option 2. The beef on the hook is gray around the edges. You don't ask how old it is. You don't ask where it came from. You just look for something that doesn't squirm or stink too loudly. A strip of liver, maybe. Or suet. Fat at least burns slow and fills the pot. You once watched the butcher chase a dog away with the flat of his knife. The dog had a tail in its mouth. No one asked questions. You get what you can. A mystery joint. Could be lamb, could be goat. Could be cat. You don't want to know. It's meat. That's what matters. You hand over your copper. He drops it into a bloody box and hands you the bundle wrapped in old cloth. No smile. No thanks. Just meat and silence. Odd fact, medieval markets sometimes hung animals upside down to drain the sin. You're not sure if that works. You're also not sure what sin tastes like, but you probably ate some last week. There's a guy near the back of the stall selling blood pudding. He says it's fresh. The color suggests otherwise. You've eaten it before. Tasted like iron spice and an argument. But it fills your stomach. And you haven't seen eggs in 3 months, so protein is protein. You look down. The floor is slick. Sawdust mixed with blood bone, and something that's definitely moving. You don't step backward. The last person who slipped cracked a rib. The butcher gave him a pig's ear as consolation. He boiled it. Said it tasted like old leather dipped in salt. Said he'd eat it again. Sometimes the butcher butchers things in front of you. He cracks a joint with the ease of someone who's done this 1,000 times. You flinch. The kids cheer. One girl vomits in a bucket. Business continues. Meat here is more than food, it's social status. If you can afford to buy it more than once a week, you're doing well. If you eat it daily, you're a noble. If you eat it and don't get sick, you're lucky. You remember once a feast day when a neighbor gifted you a chicken leg? Real chicken. Fried in butter sprinkled with salt. You held it like treasure, took one bite and cried, then dropped it. A dog took the rest. You didn't cry again, you just stared. The dog looked ashamed. A little. There are laws about meat, supposed to protect consumers, set prices, regulate quality. But enforcement is selective. And the town constable doesn't exactly check the butcher's scales unless someone complains. And no one complains. Because we need the butcher. Sometimes you wonder where the meat really comes from. You hear stories. Stray dogs vanish. Cats don't come back. Even a few vagrants have disappeared. Rumors fly. Butchers don't talk. They just cut. And the organs, hearts, lungs, intestines. You see them on the stall glistening in the sun. You once tried cooking liver, boiled it, then fried it. The smell lingered for days. You still don't know if you liked it. You just know it was hot, heavy, and didn't leave you hungry. Oh, and brains. People eat brains. You've had sheep brain stew once. It had the texture of warm butter and the flavor of wet wool. You ate it. You survived. You don't talk about it. You pass by the tallow bin, rendered fat, collected and cooled into pale bricks, used for candles, cooking, and sometimes as a trade item. You stole one once. You still feel bad. But it fed your sister through a fever. She lived. The guilt doesn't bite as hard when the hunger fades. You leave the stall. Clutch your mystery meat tight. Don't breathe too deeply. Don't look back. And don't drop it. This is a good day. You have meat. You have dinner. You have a chance. You hurry home. The butcher's cleaver falls again. Another animal. Another scream. Another story. You try not to think about it. You've got cooking to do. The bell rings slow and solemn, echoing through the stone walls of the village. It's Friday. That means fasting. You glance at the pot simmering on the fire, your hopes already low. No meat today. No fat. No eggs. Just piety. It's not that you're especially religious. It's just that the church has opinions. Strong ones. About your soul, your supper, and exactly how many animals you can't eat on holy days. And those days, they're not rare. Historians still debate the exact number, but some records suggest that medieval Christians fasted up to half the year, not just Lent, but also Advent Ember Days, vigils, saints' feasts, and every Friday that ever existed. That's a lot of days to be spiritually pure and culinarily miserable. So you look at your options. Fish, if you can get it, which you can't. You live inland. The nearest river coughs up more mud than minnows, and the coast is 4 days away. Salted fish costs more than a new shirt. So unless the church is handing it out as divine mercy, you're not having it. You once ate eel, greasy, boneless, and disturbingly snake-like. It looked like something you'd find under a log, tasted like the inside of a boot. Your uncle swore it was a delicacy. You swore to never speak of it again. So what can you eat? Bread, gruel, stew if it's made without meat. Maybe a pea mash or boiled lentils or turnips cut so thin you can see through them. You try to trick your brain. Add herbs, salt. That one weird root you found that tastes vaguely of garlic and regret. The priest says fasting cleanses the soul. You wonder if it could also clean the pot, because it smells like last week's sorrow. And here's the thing, it's not just about avoiding food. You're supposed to avoid pleasure, rich sauces, butter, anything that tastes like joy. The church didn't just want you hungry, it wanted you humble. Physically, spiritually, and especially in the mouth. That's why even when you do get fish, it's dried, or pickled, or smoked until it's more wood than food. Once a neighbor soaked cod in lye to preserve it, called it lutefisk. You called it a crime against tongues. Odd fact, some monasteries kept beavers on hand because they argued that the tail of the beaver counted as fish during Lent. Yes, you heard that right. And yes, apparently it worked. Beavers were eaten. The Lord works in mysterious, chewy ways. You once tried fasting seriously, really tried. 3 days of bread and ale, and on the 4th you saw a chicken and cried. Not because you wanted to eat it, because it looked full. Your neighbor cheats. He roasts lard into vegetables and pretends it doesn't count. He says it's for flavor. You say it's for survival. You don't rat him out. You'd do the same if you had lard. And there's the guilt, the fear, the idea that God is watching your spoon like a hawk, that every extra pinch of salt, every creamy bite adds another sin to your list. You once dreamed that a saint took your bowl away mid-slurp and smacked you with a cabbage. The priest says gluttony is a sin. You'd love to commit it someday. Today's meal is barley porridge boiled thin. You stir it with a heavy sigh. No meat, no milk, just warm water and grain. You sprinkle in a few wilted herbs, thyme maybe, or moss. Hard to tell anymore. You chew slowly. Not for flavor, just to make it last. Every bite is a reminder that your stomach obeys the calendar, not your cravings. You once asked why butter wasn't allowed. The priest explained that it awakened fleshly desires. You laughed. But then you remembered that last time you had it. And yeah, maybe he's got a point. It was transcendent. In towns, wealthy merchants sometimes paid for butter indulgences, literally buying permission to eat forbidden food during fasting. That's right. The church sold mercy. You once saw a merchant devour a leg of lamb during Lent with a grin and a note from the bishop in his pocket. You wished him gout. You hear the bell again. Evening prayers. You fold your hands. Not because you're devout, but because there's nothing else to do while the stew simmers. You close your eyes and imagine the feast days, the real ones, when meat comes back, when butter melts on fresh bread, when no one counts bites. But for now you chew your piety, swallow your sins, and stare into the pot with quiet despair. The fire crackles. The wind rattles the shutters. You sigh, and you fast. The pot is bubbling again, and this time there's something floating in it that looks familiar. Not comforting. Familiar like a face you once saw on a missing poster. You lean over. Is that yesterday's parsnip or the edge of someone's shoe? Either way, you stir it in. It'll soften eventually. This stew's not a one-night affair. It's eternal. Like that weird cousin who never moves out. It just keeps going. Add water. Add scraps. Add prayers. Repeat. It's not just in your house. Across the village, every hearth hosts its own version, each one a sad little saga of what's been found, scraped, or donated in the name of survival. The noble table might have goose and venison. You've got mystery stew that hums when no one's near it. Let's talk about flavor, or the lack thereof. Historians still debate the extent to which medieval peasants flavored their food. The ingredients existed: onions, garlic, mustard seeds, herbs, but were often seasonal, sparse, or too precious to waste on a pot full of boiled whatever this is. Salt helps when you have it, but even salt is taxed, hoarded, or kept for preserving meat you don't have. You remember once finding a sprig of rosemary. You guarded it like a relic, added it to the stew with trembling hands. The pot hissed. A new aroma rose. Everyone gathered like you'd invented fire. Then someone knocked the pot over. You didn't speak to your brother for a month. Now here's the funny part. Sometimes you think the stew likes you. You swear it tastes better when you're sad. Like it knows. You tell it secrets while you stir. Little hopes. Little jokes. It doesn't answer, but it never burns. Not completely. The stew is a constant, but not a comfort. It's never delicious, just edible. Just warm enough to trick your belly into forgetting how empty it really is. And then there are the weird ingredients. Odd fact, in times of desperation, people boiled animal bones until they dissolved, making something called bone broth, full of gelatin minerals and a certain crunch if you didn't strain it right. You've done it. The smell lingers in your clothes, your hands, your soul. You've also seen people use bread in the stew, bread stew. Think about that. Boiled bread, which was already stale to begin with. It turns into a kind of paste. Not quite solid, not quite liquid, just sadness in a bowl. Once someone added pickled fish. You still have nightmares. The stew smelled like it had emotions, none of them kind, and yet people keep coming back to it. Why? Because it's there. You don't need a recipe. You don't need measurements. You just need a pot, a fire, and a crushing sense of inevitability. Remember when that merchant passed through with dried herbs from the east? He laughed at your pot, called it peasant porridge. You offered him a bowl. He gagged after one spoonful. You smiled, because he didn't get it. This stew isn't for taste. It's for memory. Every layer holds something. A carrot from 3 days ago. The bean you dropped and couldn't find. A whisper of garlic someone traded for a favor. A splash of ale that boiled away but left behind a hint of not wretched. Some say the stew absorbs your life. That each time you stir, it learns you. That's nonsense, of course. But you still stir clockwise, just in case. And when it thickens too much, you add water. Always water. Cold, dirty, questionable water. Which you boil, which you bless. Which you hope doesn't boil away your last chance at flavor. Your grandmother swore she once had a stew that tasted like beef. No beef in it. Just flavor left behind from a bone someone passed down like an heirloom. Legacy stew, she called it. You've never tasted beef. You're not even sure it's real. One night you got bold. Took the stew off the fire. Let it rest. Added a splash of sour wine and a bit of cheese rind. For a moment, just a moment, it tasted like hope. You cried into your bowl. No one noticed. They were too busy chewing. You think about that sometimes. How food isn't about satisfaction anymore. It's about continuation. Each bite pushes you forward one more hour, one more chore, one more day without collapse. So you stir, you sip, you survive. The stew keeps going, so do you. You're not sure what that is on the platter. It has legs. It has feathers. It has colors. Bright ones. Someone clearly spent time reattaching plumage to a cooked bird, like it was being prepared for a masquerade ball. You blink. Is it supposed to look like that? Welcome to a noble feast. This isn't your table, of course. You're here on account of luck work or some cruel joke of fate. Maybe you're serving. Maybe you're entertaining. Maybe you're just close enough to sniff the air and dream. But this isn't your world. The long table stretches into candlelit grandeur. Velvet cloths, silver plates, goblets taller than your dreams. The fire glows. The music plays. And the food. The food is weird. You expected roast meat, sure. Maybe some bread. Maybe even a bit of cheese. What you didn't expect was a full peacock roasted whole, then dressed again in its own feathers. It looks like it's judging you. You're not wrong. Historians still debate whether such feast animals were actually eaten or just displayed. What you do know, it's here. It smells slightly of lemon and slightly of despair. Someone claims it was boiled in wine. Someone else says it sings when carved. You don't stay long enough to find out. There's a swan, too. Majestic, pale, and completely inedible. You saw the cook shove an apple in its beak. It looks offended. The nobles cheer. You sit quietly. You watch. You thought rich people ate better. In some ways, yes. They had more. But better, that's debatable. They didn't always go for flavor. They went for spectacle. This wasn't dinner. It was theater. Odd fact, some noble dishes were designed to move. Meat pies with live birds hidden inside. Tarts that spilled jewels. A roasted boar's head with wax eyes that stared into your soul. One time a pudding exploded. You're still not sure if it was intentional. And the colors, oh the colors. Food is dyed with everything from saffron to crushed flowers to, in some horrifying cases, ground minerals. You saw a blue egg once. It wasn't laid that way. It was dyed with iris petals. Tasted like perfume and bad choices. The sauces flow like rivers. Mustard vinegar, honey, almond milk, cinnamon, sometimes all at once. The nobles say it's exotic. You say it's a mouthful of confusion. You tasted a goose leg dipped in rosewater once. Your tongue still hasn't forgiven you. There are pies, too. Towering, sculpted, glorious monstrosities of meat and crust. But the crust isn't for eating. It's for holding. Hard, dense, and sealed with wax. They cut off the top, scoop out the filling, and toss the shell. You would have eaten it. You wanted to eat it. A servant dropped a tray. You caught a fallen sausage and didn't even pretend to hesitate. Warm, spiced, and slightly gritty. You didn't ask what it was made of. You were too happy. and the jellies wobbly shining towers of congealed broth and herbs, sometimes shaped like castles, sometimes like animals. One had a frog inside. You weren't sure if it was decoration or a culinary dare. You once heard a noblewoman complain that her salmon was too pink. You laughed out loud. She didn't notice. You laughed harder. Then came the sugar. Yes, sugar. Imported expensive and used to build sculptures. Castles, boats, even trees. You watched a marzipan deer get stabbed by a noble child with alarming joy. That deer probably cost more than your house. You wonder what it's like to choose your food, to say no to a dish, to leave something untouched. You'd lick the platter clean, but it's made of gold and you're fairly sure you'd be executed. Still, there's one thing about noble food you envy butter. It's everywhere. Melted, whipped, mixed with herbs shaped into roses. You saw a man dip bread into butter, then dip it in honey, then throw the rest away. You almost screamed. They say the nobles get sick a lot. Too much meat, too little fiber, too many spices. You believe it. You've seen them sweat through meals red-faced and hiccuping, groaning like cattle at slaughter. One threw up in a vase. No one blinked. Historians think food poisoning was common. Not surprising. Under all that gold leaf and gravy, the meat still rotted. The cooks just learned how to make rot smell like roses. You once snuck a bone from the table's edge, wrapped it in a rag, took it home, boiled it 3 times, fed your siblings. They cheered. You felt like a king. You look around now. The nobles are drunk, laughing, reaching for another course. You feel the ache of hunger rise not just in your stomach, but in your chest. A different kind of hunger. The kind that wonders, why not me? Then someone calls for the next dish. You step back into the shadows, away from the glinting platters, away from the perfume and the roast herons stuffed with almonds. You'll go home to stew, to bread, to reality. But for a moment you were here, among the feathers and the flames, and that's something. The bread on your table is dense, sour, and already hardening at the edges, but at least it's yours. At least no one can take it, unless, of course, they legally can. Because in this world, even what you eat is controlled by people you've never met, wearing robes you'll never afford. Let's talk about laws, sumptuary laws, food guilds, royal edicts, each one like an invisible hand slapping your bowl if it gets too full. You thought hunger was bad. Try hunger with paperwork. Historians still debate whether these laws were enforced strictly or just symbolically. But you don't need debate. You need dinner. And if you, a peasant, dare to buy white bread or worse, bake it yourself, you'd better hope no one's watching. Because that's illegal. White bread is for the rich. Brown bread is for you. Not because of nutrition, because of class. If you're caught baking too fine a loaf, the local lord might fine you, scold you, or just take your oven. You don't own an oven, but you know people who've lost theirs. Now they bake in the ground under coals in secret. You remember once someone made illegal pastries. Honeyed, flaky, delicious. They sold them at the fair. The sheriff shut the whole stall down, confiscated the pies, said it was a violation of guild rights. You watched him eat one as he walked away. Guilds control food in the towns. Bakers, butchers, brewers, they all need licenses, rules, inspections. Sounds good, right? Quality control, fair pricing. Except when you're the one outside the guild. Like the widow who tried to sell mushroom pies to feed her kids. No license, no protection. One spoiled pie, one sick merchant, and she was banned from the market. You helped her bury her last pig. Not because it died of old age, because she couldn't afford feed anymore. She stewed it, shared it. You still think about that stew. Then there's the tithe. The church demands a portion of your harvest. Grain eggs, sometimes even meat. You give or you're cursed. You're not even sure that's a metaphor. The priest once gave a sermon about hell while eating salted duck. No one asked where he got the duck. And don't forget taxes. The king needs coin. The Lord needs rent. The knight needs armor. So your bread gets thinner. Your soup gets stretchier. Your stomach gets louder. Odd fact, there were actual laws limiting how many courses you could serve at a meal. Not for you, obviously for the rich. So they found loopholes. They stacked food. They disguised dishes. They called it cultural expression. You call it cheating. You once dreamed of a table where everyone could eat anything. No guilds, no rules, just food. Warm, honest food. Then you woke up to a fine for unauthorized cheese production. You don't even remember making cheese. People think food laws are about health. They're not. They're about control. Who gets what, when, how much, and why you'll never get enough. You've heard whispers of rebels people in the forest, living free hunting game, roasting meat over open fires, seasoning things with more than salt. You want to believe it's real. But then you remember the fine you got for picking too many mushrooms on protected land. You want to laugh, but your mouth is dry. Not from thirst, from caution. Words are rationed too. Still, you resist. In small ways. You trade under the table. You bake bread that's just a little too light. You grow herbs you're not supposed to. You feed people without a license. You once hosted a secret meal, just turnips and barley and laughter. No one reported you. The priest might have even known. He smiled when he walked by. A real smile. Not the sermon kind. Because in a world where hunger is enforced, every shared meal is rebellion. You finish your bread. Wipe your fingers on your tunic. There's flour on your knees and defiance in your belly. You may not have power, but you have food. Barely. Quietly. Illegally. And that somehow still counts as winning. The butcher is gone. Not for good, just for the day. The stall is empty now, a blood-slicked table gleaming in the twilight. Flies swarm like it's their birthday. You step over a smear of something unidentifiable and wonder if you should have bought the beef when you had the chance. Then again, it smelled like wet leather and possibly vengeance, so maybe not. You look at your coin. It's warm from your palm. Not enough to buy much. Maybe a bone. Maybe not even that. You need meat, real meat, or what passes for it in this world. And that means it's time to bargain. There's a back alley butcher, not official, not licensed, but cheaper. He works out of his shed behind the mill. No sign, no prices, no guarantees. He once offered you something he called black pork. You didn't ask. You just boiled it for 6 hours and didn't tell your siblings where it came from. Historians still debate how common food fraud was in medieval markets. They say there were laws, inspectors, standards. Sure, in theory. But here in the shadowy corners of village life, if it smells edible, it is edible. You pass a boy with a basket of rats. He's not hiding them. He's selling them. 2 for a penny. You pretend not to see. You've eaten rat before. You're not ashamed, but you don't want to remember. You stop at the tanner's hut, not for leather, for information. He knows what animals came through which were too sick to skin, which accidentally made it to the food stalls. He tells you without blinking that today's beef was probably horse. You thank him with half a loaf of stale bread. You once ate a stew made from mystery meat. It was stringy gray and slightly sweet. Everyone said it was mutton. You're still not sure. You hope it was mutton. And there's always the roadside. Animals die there, hit by wagons, caught in traps, sometimes just collapse. If you find one early before the birds and bugs do, it's fair game. You know a family who lives off roadkill. They stew it with vinegar and onions until it surrenders. Odd fact, in some regions, old laws allowed peasants to take meat from animals that died naturally. The definition of naturally was flexible. A push, a fright, a conveniently placed pit that's between you and your conscience. Then there's the dog butcher. He doesn't say that's what he is, but everyone knows. No one talks about it, not in public. He makes sausages that are surprisingly good. No one asks questions. You only eat them when you're truly desperate. And don't get started on pigeons. The rich raise them for sport. The poor trap them for survival. You once snared 3 in a week, ate one, sold the others. One had a silver ring around its foot. You boiled that ring for soup base, metallic but filling. You find a woman selling meat pies. No label, no ingredients. You ask what's inside. She smiles with all 3 of her teeth and says flavor. You hand her a coin, bite into the pie. It's hot, flaky, and tastes like something that once had a name. You don't care. You eat it fast, before your brain can argue. Food fraud, meat mislabeling, substitution. That's not scandal here. That's survival. Everyone's doing what they must. You remember when the priest denounced fake meat vendors during Mass, said it was a sin to deceive. Then you saw him at the black market butcher an hour later, haggling over smoked goose. That's the way it goes. You follow the rules until they starve you. Then you bend them until they feed you. Once you helped a woman bury her dog, not in grief, in fear. She was afraid someone would eat it. That says more about your village than any sermon ever could. But don't think it's all horror. Sometimes you strike gold. A real roast. A fresh egg. A rabbit you caught yourself. Those meals feel holy. Not just full, but sacred. Like the universe forgot just for a second to make things hard. You savor them. You remember them. You dream of them when the stew tastes like wet bark and your bread could break a window. Tonight you walk home with a bundle of something wrapped in cloth. Could be pork. Might be goat. Might be raccoon. You don't ask. You don't sniff. You cook it slow, let it speak, and you eat, because in this life you take what you can. And sometimes what you can take is enough. The grain merchant has a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. You see it every time you pass the cart half covered in canvas sacks stacked like bricks of potential. Wheat, barley, rye, oats, none of them cheap, none of them guaranteed to be clean. But they're what stand between your family and true hunger, and he knows it. You step forward, coin in hand, careful not to sound too eager, because the price isn't fixed. It depends on how desperate you look, and today you look desperate. He names a number. You wince. He shrugs. Bad harvest, he says. War in the south, he adds. Rats in the granary. Pick your excuse, they all lead to the same place, your empty purse. You buy what you can. A sack of barley half-weight may be mixed with sand. You've bitten into enough bread to know what that feels like. Grit between your teeth. stone dust on your tongue. And here's the thing, this isn't just inflation, this is power. In the medieval world, food wasn't just nourishment, it was a weapon. Grain most of all, because everyone needs it, because it stores well, because it can be hoarded, traded, taxed, or stolen. Historians still debate how systematic this control was. But in your village, it's obvious. The landlord has cellars full of wheat while you're boiling tree bark, and he lets you starve. On purpose. You remember last winter. The granaries were locked. You begged. Literally begged. The steward said no. The mice ate better that month than you did. Grain rations are politics. The Lord controls the mill. The miller controls the flour. And you just try not to get caught stealing husks. Odd fact, some millers were known to skive a little off the top, taking a handful of grain from every bag. Not officially theft, just payment. But over a season, it added up. You once worked the mill. Your hands smelled like flour and quiet crimes. The millstones never stop turning, and neither does the hunger. One year, the price of rye doubled, then tripled, then vanished entirely. There was none. People boiled acorns. People ate grass. You tried both. You're still not sure which one gave you the rash. You once saw a man buy a bag of grain, then get jumped in the alley. They didn't rob him. They took the grain and left the coins. That's what it had come to. Grain over gold. You tried growing your own. A corner of the commons barely legal. The Lord's men stomped it flat by accident. Said you were poaching land. You wanted to scream. You wanted to fight. You just went home. And then there's the tithe. 1/10 of your grain every season to the church. You carry it in sacks on your back. The priest smiles. He blesses it. He eats it. You watch your labor become his supper. Sometimes you think of rebellion, of storming the Lord's granary, of taking what's yours. Others have tried. You remember the smoke, the shouting, the bodies in the mud. Grain still burned in the fire. No one got any, so you adjust. You stretch. You learn to love porridge. You bake flatbread that's more ash than flour. You pretend beer is food. You once ate a spoonful of flour raw just to remember what it could become. You teach your siblings how to cheat the scale. Add stones to the sack. Pack the bottom. Smile wide. Say nothing. You teach them how to survive. You've heard tales from travelers of lands where grain flows freely, where no one goes hungry, where you can grind your own wheat and keep it. You want to believe them, but you've never seen such a place. Just roads and fields and faces like yours. So you take your sack of barley home, pour it out, pick out the bugs, grind what you can, boil the rest, and tomorrow you'll come back, because grain is life, and life here is rationed. The first frost came last night. You felt it before you saw it, your breath hanging in the air, your fingers stiff even before the sun rose. When you step outside, the grass crackles underfoot like brittle parchment. Winter is here, which means hunger is about to become more than just familiar. It's about to become personal. You take inventory. One sack of barley, mostly dust. A few wrinkled onions. Some dried beans. Half a wheel of cheese that smells like something's still alive in it. A turnip. The stew pot, of course. And a prayer. Historians still debate the average medieval peasant's winter survival rate. But you don't need statistics. You need fuel for the fire, for your belly, for your soul. And all of it is running low. The cold changes everything. Your house, already damp and drafty, now becomes a trap. The hearth must stay lit, but fuel is scarce. You burn whatever you find: sticks, straw, dung, old shoes. The stew pot simmers less now, and when it does, it's thinner than your patience. You remember last winter. You gnawed leather, real leather, scraped it, soaked it, boiled it, and chewed it like jerky. Your jaw ached for days, but your stomach stopped screaming. The hardest part isn't the emptiness, it's the slowness. Time crawls in winter. The sun barely rises before it sinks again. You count daylight in spoons, in steps, in logs. Every decision is a calculation. Burn the wood for warmth, or use it to cook something if there's something to cook. You once split a dried bean between 3 people. You don't remember if it helped. You just remember how quiet the room was as it boiled. You trap what you can: mice, birds, bugs. You got a squirrel once, roasted it whole, ate every part, even the tail. It wasn't good, but it was food. Odd fact, during desperate winters, people made soup from tree bark. Elm was best. You tried it. Chewy, bitter, tasted like wet shoes, but it filled you. Barely. Your neighbor eats clay, mixes it with grain, bakes it into cakes. You tell him it's dangerous. He tells you hunger is worse. You stop arguing. You remember the story of the family that boiled stones, just for the sound, the smell of water, the illusion of eating. You laughed when you first heard it. You didn't laugh last winter. Then there's the hunger fever. The point when the body turns cold, the mind fogs, and even the pot looks edible. You saw it once. A boy tried to eat ashes, just scooped them up and swallowed. He survived, somehow. People call it a miracle. You call it timing. People change in the winter. Softer voices, slower steps. The laughter dies down. No one has energy for jokes. Just chores. Just survival. You hug each other tighter, not just for warmth, but to remind yourselves you're still here. Sometimes the church sends food. Barley, salt, sometimes even meat. It's a gesture, a blessing, but not enough. The priest prays for spring. You pray for soup. One night you trade your last piece of cloth for a bag of lentils. The cloth was supposed to become a new shirt. You decide shirts are overrated. You make stew instead. You once dreamed of summer. Woke up biting your own hand. Thought it was a pear. Still have the scar. Every day is the same now. Gather, scrape, burn, chew, sleep, repeat. But still you endure. Because winter is a season, not a sentence. Because the snow will melt. The buds will bloom. The earth will give again. Because you've seen it before, and you'll see it again. You huddle close to the fire. Wrap yourself in wool that smells like smoke and sorrow. Sip broth that tastes like boiled memory. And you wait, because the cold starves, but so far it hasn't won. Not yet. You hear the scratching in the wall before you see it. A soft skitter, a pause, then a burst of tiny feet across the rafters. You freeze, not from fear, from calculation. That's not a pest, that's dinner. You grab the sack, the trap, the rock. Whatever's close. Move slow, quiet. Breathe through your teeth. Hunger has tuned your body like an instrument. You don't think in fear anymore. You think in calories. You've eaten worse, and you'll eat worse again. But right now, that rat is survival on 4 legs. Historians still debate how widespread rodent consumption was in medieval Europe, but they weren't there. You are. And when the frost bites, when the stew is water, and when the bread is memory, rat is meat. You catch it. Quick, efficient, no celebration, just relief. You've done this before. You clean it over the fire carefully. Skin off, organs out. You've learned which parts to keep, which to bury. You tried roasting one whole once, regretted it for days. This time you stew it. Always stew. Water softens what hunger sharpens. Your siblings gather around. No one jokes. No one thanks you. They just eat. That's gratitude enough. And it's not just rats. You've eaten sparrows, hedgehogs, a frog once, though you didn't know it was a frog until it was already gone. It tasted like mud and fear. Odd fact, in parts of France, people still eat dormice, tiny rodents stuffed and spiced. In Rome, they were delicacies. Here, they're necessities. And you don't spice them. You just hope they died recently. Once you caught a crow. Feathers black as coal. Cooked it over open flame. The meat was tough, stringy. It fought back. But you chewed through the resistance. Hunger makes you determined. You found a nest of eggs, once wild, cold, nearly frozen. You cracked them open into the pot. One had a blood spot. You stirred faster. Everyone pretended not to see. And yes, sometimes it gets darker. One winter, a dog vanished. No one asked questions. The stew smelled rich that night. You looked into your bowl and made yourself forget. You've bartered for meat you couldn't identify. Paid for sausages with fur in them. You didn't ask. You just boiled them. You just fed your family. You just survived. People talk about food chains. You live in one, but the chain is more like a noose. Every day a little tighter. Every night you wonder who or what will feed you tomorrow. There's shame at first. The first rat. The first pigeon you hit with a rock. The first time you dug through trash hoping for bones. But it fades. Hunger scrapes away shame until all that's left is instinct. And even that grows quiet over time. You once found a rabbit caught in bramble. Its leg was broken. It screamed when you touched it. You cried as you killed it. You cried as you skinned it. You cried as you fed your siblings. You didn't cry when you licked the pot clean. You haven't cried since. Sometimes someone dies. Old age, cold, fever. The smell is familiar. You bury them, always. But you wonder, quietly, in the back of your mind, what would they have done? Then you pray, because you're not that far gone, not yet. You steal bread from traps, scraps from dogs. You sniff the air like an animal. You are an animal, but you're alive. And that's the goal, isn't it? Survival, at all costs. So when someone offers you a skewer of meat, you don't ask what it is. You say thank you. You chew, you swallow, and you move on. Because tomorrow is coming, and it might be worse. You taste it before you see its salt. Thick, rough, crystalline. Your lips shrivel just from the memory. Salt is everywhere now. In the meat, in the bread, in the stew. It clings to your tongue like a second skin. Welcome to preservation season. You need food to last. That means salting it until it's more mineral than meal. Your stomach doesn't appreciate it. Your kidneys definitely don't. But your survival, it depends on it. Everything is salted. Pork, fish, sometimes cheese. Once even a cabbage. That one didn't go well. You rub salt into meat until your hands crack. You pack it in barrels, in cloth, in jars. You dry it in the wind. You hang it over smoke. You bury it in ash. You'd embalm your dinner like a pharaoh if it meant it wouldn't rot. Historians still debate how much nutrition was lost in the process. But let's be real. You're not thinking about vitamins. You're thinking about not dying in February. Odd fact, salt wasn't just food, it was currency. Wars were fought over salt mines. Taxes were levied on it. The word salary comes from it. And you just wish it didn't make your mouth feel like sandpaper. Salt is expensive. Always. So you stretch it. You cut it with ash, with flour, even with ground shells. One time someone sold you fake salt made from crushed limestone. You didn't realize until your teeth started screaming. You once tried to preserve meat with honey instead. It worked for a while. Then the ants came. Thousands of them. You woke up with them in your bed, in your stew, in your hair. You've never used honey again. There's salted fish, of course. Stiff as a board. Sharp as guilt. You have to soak it for hours just to make it edible. The water turns gray. The smell never leaves your pot. You remember a time when someone traded you a piece of bacon. Real bacon. It was so salty you had to drink water between bites. But you smiled the entire time. Your cheeks burned. Your tongue went numb. It was perfect. Your body adjusts. You don't crave flavor anymore. You crave preservation, stability, control. Salt offers that. You even tried making your own once boiling brine from a marsh until crystals formed. Took hours. You burned your face with steam. But when you scraped those grains from the pot, you felt like royalty. You've heard that in other lands they use ice, cold cellars, even caves. You have a box. It's wooden, dark, smells like old soup. That's your pantry. That's where the salted meat sleeps. You ration it carefully. A scrap for today, a scrap for tomorrow. You use the salty broth for soup. You dip stale bread in it. You soak beans in it. You once caught a child licking the inside of a salt barrel. You didn't stop him because you understood salt doesn't just preserve food. It preserves hope. The hope that tomorrow something will still be edible. The hope that you won't have to start over. The hope that your work means something. So you keep salting, keep drying, keep smoking. You hang fish from the rafters like decorations. You wrap meat in cloth and whisper prayers to it. Please last. Please keep. Please feed us later. Because winter is long, and salt is the only promise it seems to keep. You hear the shouting before you see the flames. Somewhere down the road, the granary's been breached. You blink hard, rub the smoke from your eyes, and realize what's happening. Someone finally snapped. And you don't blame them, because when people are hungry long enough, when rules starve them harder than nature ever could, sometimes they riot. Food isn't just survival anymore. It's anger. Historians still debate the causes behind many medieval uprisings. Some say taxes, others religion. But anyone who's ever gone to bed hungry knows it starts in the stomach. A famine isn't just a weather event, it's a match. And today, someone lit it. You run toward the noise, not to join, not yet, but to witness. Fires lick the wooden corners of the Lord's storehouse. Barrels are smashed. Sacks are torn open like gifts. People are laughing, crying, stuffing flour into aprons and fists. It's chaos. Glorious, wild chaos. You spot the steward on the steps, shouting threats no one listens to. A boy throws a carrot at him. It bounces off his head. The crowd cheers. Odd fact during real medieval food riots, people often targeted bakers and merchants first. Not because they hated them, but because they needed them. Needed them to feel the desperation, to break open their cellars, to level the plates. You've never seen flour in the air like this. It hangs in clouds, ghostly glowing in the firelight. Someone hands you a loaf, still warm. No questions. Just take it. You do. It tastes like adrenaline. You find your sister. She's laughing, holding a sack over her shoulder. It's leaking grain. You both know it won't last. That retribution will come. That the Lord's men will ride in swords drawn and full of consequence. But for now, you eat. Not in fear, not in silence, in defiance, because food is control. And for this one night, no one controls you. Someone starts a chant. You don't join in, but the rhythm pulses through you. A hunger deeper than the belly. One that says, we matter. We deserve to eat. It's not just peasants either. You spot a clerk from the manor house. He's throwing cheese into the crowd. A monk tosses apples from a cart. The lines blur when bellies are empty. You once dreamed of a world where meals were shared, not stolen. This is the closest you've ever seen it come true. Brief, violent, but real. And there's a joy in that. A terrifying, beautiful joy. You don't loot much. A handful of dried beans, 2 onions, a hunk of salted pork. Enough to stretch through the next week. You stash them beneath your cloak, heart pounding like a drum. Then you run, not out of guilt, out of necessity. The soldiers will come. They always do. They'll call it theft, treason, heresy. You'll call it eating. Back home, you bolt the door, feed your siblings, say nothing. They don't ask. They just eat, quickly, gratefully, quietly. Because tomorrow the stocks will be rebuilt, the rules reinforced, the prices doubled. But tonight you were fed. And no one can take that from you. The bells toll again, but this time they don't sound like hunger, they sound like death. Low, slow, distant. You stop stirring the pot and listen. One toll, then another, then 3 in a row. Someone has died. Maybe from the cold, maybe from the fever, or maybe once again from the food. Because the plague doesn't knock. It settles in the bread in the bowls, in the hands that feed. And suddenly, everything you eat feels like a threat. You remember the first time it came through, years ago, or maybe weeks. Time gets strange when the graveyards are full. The baker got it first, then the miller. Then half the village vanished behind closed doors and drawn curtains. You watched the stew pot grow dusty from disuse. No one wanted to eat. No one wanted to cook. The smell of meat made people gag not from rot, but from memory. Historians still debate how the Black Death changed diets. Some say it improved things, fewer mouths to feed more food for survivors. Others say it broke the whole system. You're not sure. All you know is that no food tastes right when the people who made it are gone. Odd fact, during plague years, people believed bad smells spread the disease. So they stuffed herbs into food, burned spices in the kitchen, wore garlic necklaces. You once wore one too half for protection, half to mask the scent of old stew and fear. Markets closed, taverns emptied. The priest buried people with one hand and blessed loaves with the other. You stopped going to church. Too many ghosts in the pews. Too many whispers over empty plates. The rich fled, of course. Took their cured meats, their dried fruits, their salt cellars and sugar loaves. Left the rest behind. You remember the manor's pantry door swinging open in the wind. You didn't go in. You didn't want to know what they left behind. Food superstition flourished. People boiled rosemary to purify their grain. Others fasted in fear. Some refused to eat meat at all. You watched your neighbor throw out a basket of eggs, said they smelled like death. They didn't. You picked them up and made a frittata anyway. You didn't die, but some did. You fed your family with fear in your throat. You boiled every drop, burned bread to black. Let pots stew for hours longer than they needed, just to be sure. Once someone said the plague was carried in flour, that every loaf was a gamble, that even barley soup could betray you. You stopped eating for a day, then two. Then the hunger won and you ate anyway, carefully, slowly, with prayers you'd long stopped believing in. You watched a mother bury her child with a handful of berries in her hand. His favorite, she said. He hadn't eaten in days. The berries weren't poison, just too late. And then it passed. Not quickly, not quietly, but eventually. The bells rang less often. The stew started bubbling again. People came back to the markets. Nervous, thin, but alive. They bought onions like amulets, ate bread like it was sacred, which in a way it was. You don't trust food the way you once did, but you eat anyway. That's what survival is, eating through the fear. Even now, when someone coughs, your stomach knots. When meat smells too strong, you hesitate. When the baker's wife sneezes, you stir your pot just a little longer, because you remember. Because food doesn't just feed, it kills too. But not today. Today the stew is safe. And that's enough. You watch the woman across the square drop a crust of bread, then pick it up, kiss it, and set it on the windowsill to let the spirits have it. She's done it every day this week. You used to laugh. Now you nod quietly. Because by now you've seen enough to know in a world where food rarely makes sense, people reach for meaning wherever they can. Welcome to the world of food magic myths and miracles. It starts small. A charm stitched into your grain sack. A whisper over your stew. A rhyme said 3 times while you stir clockwise with your non-dominant hand. Protection, maybe. Distraction, definitely. But when the nights are cold and the rats are bold, a little ritual can feel like armor. Historians still debate how widespread food magic really was. Were these beliefs genuine, or just desperation wearing a cloak? But you've lived it, you've done it, and whether or not it works, it feels like it does. Your grandmother used to bless the bread. Every loaf, every time. Cross it with a knife. So no devil rides inside, she said. You never saw a devil in a loaf, but once you skipped the blessing and the bread burned. Coincidence, maybe. You've never skipped it again. Odd fact, some people believed that bread wouldn't rise if there was arguing in the kitchen. That anger could curdle cream. That fear could sour milk. You don't know about the science, but you've seen too many ruined meals to argue with the logic. There are love potions, too. Parsley in wine. Honey under the tongue. A pie crust with initials carved underneath. You made one once, for a girl who never noticed. You ate the whole pie yourself, feeling very foolish and very full. People leave offerings. Bits of grain on thresholds. Bowls of broth at shrines. One man carved runes into his cheese. He said it kept mold away. It didn't, but we admired his effort. And dreams, so many dreams. People swear they dreamed of onions before a good harvest. of fish before a feast. One time you dreamed of a golden apple and found a bruised pear the next day. Close enough. You once met a herbalist who claimed thyme could protect your home from famine. You bought a bundle, hung it above your door. Still there. Hasn't worked yet, but it smells nice. Some myths say butter attracts spirits. Others say it repels them. You tried putting a butter pat on the windowsill. A cat ate it. The next day your cough went away. Coincidence, maybe. Probably. Still, you've done it every Tuesday since. Then there are the stories. Tales of enchanted loaves that never shrink. Stew pots that refill. A tree that bleeds sweet sap if you whisper your hunger to it. Children love them. Adults pretend not to. You cling to them on the worst days like a second skin. Your neighbor once claimed her porridge glowed. Blessed by a saint, she said. You said nothing, but the next time your pot looked strange, you made the sign of the cross and ate anyway. Because magic isn't about proof, it's about possibility. And in a world where the stew never quite satisfies, where bread betrays, where meat is a question, and hunger is a constant, you need a little magic. So you keep the rituals, the charms, the whispers. You stir clockwise. You bless your bread. You thank your stew, just in case. You finish chewing the last bite of turnip-soaked bread and set the bowl down slowly. Your stomach isn't full, just quiet. Not satisfied, just not empty. And that in this life is a victory. You've made it through another day. You glance around your hut. Cracked walls. Ash in the hearth. The pot still bubbling, still asking for scraps. Outside, the sun is bleeding into the earth, and the wind smells like wet bark and tired goats. You can't afford to hate it. This is home. Food for you has never been about taste. It's never been candlelight and conversation. It's never been something you post or pose with or critique on parchment, like some noble glutton who thinks cloves make him a philosopher. Food in your world is survival, and barely that. Every day you've fought for it, and every day it's fought you back. You've eaten mold bone broth rats roots bark. You've choked down bread so hard it left bruises in your mouth. You've drunk water that stared back. You've bartered dignity for soup and smiled while doing it. You've fasted on feast days and feasted on fasting days because the body doesn't know the church calendar. It only knows hunger. And through it all, food has been political, controlled, weaponized. The difference between a warm night and a grave. You remember them all, every meal, every miracle. The stolen apple, the squirrel stew, the slice of salted meat passed hand to hand in silence. You remember who gave you food and who took it, who shared and who shut their doors. Hunger teaches you everything you need to know about people. Odd fact. After all this, your favorite food is still cheese. Not noble cheese. Just a small hard wedge, barely aged, salted, sour, and real. You once traded a full day's work for one. Ate it slowly, alone, like it was gold. You still remember how it crumbled. Historians will write about your time, your suffering, your resilience. They'll call it subsistence farming, food insecurity, dietary monotony. You call it living, barely, brutally, beautifully. You sigh, stir the pot one more time, and lay down near the fire. Tomorrow, the hunger will return. The stew will thin. The bread will harden. And you'll begin again. But for tonight, you're fed, and that's enough. Word count 100. 300 word closing summary. The fire's low now. Your limbs are heavy. The night wraps around your shoulders like a wool blanket full of holes, and your belly, though never full, no longer aches. You made it, not through a feast, but through famine. Through the bitter mornings of empty cupboards, through the stews that asked for nothing but patience, through the bread that broke your teeth and still earned your thanks. Food in the medieval world was never just food. It was a language, a law, a line between life and death. It was control and comfort and chaos. It was something you fought for, hoped for, hid, prayed over, and it shaped you. It taught you the strength of soup and the sorrow of salt. It taught you to stretch meals and stretch meaning, to bless crumbs, to boil stones, to savor silence between chews. It taught you that flavor is a luxury, but presence still being here is everything. Tonight maybe you dream of fruit, of warm bread, of a stream clear enough to drink from without fear. Maybe you dream of cheese that doesn't crumble, of wine that doesn't sting, of a stew that sings instead of sighs. Or maybe you don't dream at all, just sleep, safe, still, because you've learned the oldest lesson of all: to eat is to resist, to chew is to hope, and to survive on whatever you can find, make or imagine, is the most radical act of all. So rest now quietly in the memory of a world that never fed you kindly, but still somehow let you stay. End of script. Good night.